Gentleman from Alexander, Mr. Levine.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the patron.
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
I would ask the patron, Mr. Speaker, where the money comes from to provide the training for victims.
Mr. Speaker, the fund in question is the Virginia Sexual and Domestic Violence Victim Fund. I can't speak because I chose a long time ago to avoid the appropriations track in this body. I can't speak to how that fund is funded. Perhaps someone more learned in that area can tell me. What I can tell the gentleman is that although there were concerns espoused that this would somehow affect that fund being used in other respects, I'm told by the subcommittee chairman of Public Safety and Appropriations that there was about $100,000 left over last year. It takes about $65 or so to take a firearms training course. So, Mr. Speaker, I would tell the gentleman that if his concerns are that we would negatively affect the fund, that those concerns are misguided.
Mr. Speaker, I have a follow-up. With the gentleman would yield.
Will the gentleman yield?
I will yield to a question.
My question for the patron is, what is this fund used for currently other than firearms training?
Mr. Speaker, again, this is a little bit outside my area of expertise, but I understand that it funds various services related to sexual and domestic violence around the Commonwealth.
Mr. Speaker, one last follow-up.
Will the gentleman yield?
Again, I will yield to a question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, the proper thing is to say, will the gentleman yield for a question?
Will you? Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Speaker.
gentleman yields.
Will gentleman
I will yield.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last question I have is, would it mean that there would be the money that would be used for firearms training would not be available for things like civil legal assistance and providing for prosecution of domestic violence?
Yes, the gentleman is correct that it would in fact be used to actually save women's lives and may not be available for other things.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has floor.
Briefly, I would note that the Sexual and Domestic Violence Victims Fund goes to civil legal assistance for victims, it goes to services provided for victims, and it goes to help prosecute the abusers that harm these victims. And I would simply say that if there were more money appropriated, that might be a different case. But in this case, we're taking money from very useful things and putting it into something that I think would save less lives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman, Prince William, is
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has floor.
Mr. Speaker, I would just like to echo the point I believe that the gentleman from Shenandoah made accurately, which was in subcommittee we heard there's about $100,000 that's not obligated in the fund now. And what we said to the people who came to the subcommittee hearing was that this seemed like it would have a relatively modest impact on the remaining $100,000, and that we would look at it next year. We'd get a measure to see how much money was spent between the time this bill goes into law on the 1st of July and the beginning of the next year, and see what the real impact would be. But we're quite confident that there is sufficient funding, and no funding is being removed from anyone. So just want to clarify that right now.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading? Those in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The bill is engrossed and passed to its third reading.